The harsh, fluorescent hum of the backstage dressing room did nothing to drown out the roar of the restless crowd filtering into the main arena. Elias pressed the heels of his hands against his closed eyes, breathing in ragged, shallow gasps that made his chest heave. On the desk in front of him, the glowing red "Delete System" prompt on his laptop screen seemed to pulse in the dim light, mocking his paralysis. Clara's sharp heels clicked violently against the linoleum before she shoved the door open, the heavy wood slamming against the wall. She didn't hesitate, her sharp eyes locking onto the screen and then instantly darting to Elias's pale, sweat-slicked face. "Tell me you are not about to do what I think you're about to do," Clara said, her voice dropping into a dangerously low register that left no room for negotiation. She crossed her arms, her tailored blazer pulling tight across her shoulders as she blocked the exit. Elias swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing rapidly as he kept his gaze fixed on the frayed carpet. His voice came out as a fragile, fractured whisper, barely audible over the crowd noise. "It's not ready, Clara. The neural algorithm is unstable. If I've run this live demo, it's gonna crash. We'll be a laughingstock. Again." Clara stepped forward, closing the distance between them, her posture radiating an immovable, grounding strength. She leaned down, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You have tested this code 1,000 times in the isolated sandbox. It works, Elias. It is flawless." "The sandbox isn't the real world," Elias snapped, finally looking up, his eyes wide and bloodshot. His knuckles turned stark white as he gripped the edge of the dressing table, his knuckles trembling. "In the real world, things break, people judge, the board members pull their funding. Did you forget the London summit? Did you forget how the entire interface froze in front of 3,000 people? How they tore our reputation apart in the press?" Clara sighed, her expression softening just a fraction, the rigid line of her jaw relaxing as she took in the sheer, unadulterated panic radiating from her business partner. She reached out and gently pushed the laptop screen down, severing his visual connection to the destructive red button. "I haven't forgotten London, but I also haven't forgotten the 3 years of relentless, agonizing work you put in to fix every single mistake we made that day. You are not the same naive engineer who stood on that stage 2 years ago. But the fear is exactly the same," Elias murmured, his shoulders slumping as if the physical weight of the entire convention center had settled directly onto his back. He buried his face in his hands, his voice muffled and defeated. "It's suffocating me. I can't breathe out there. I can't survive another public failure, Clara. I just can't." Clara grabbed his wool overcoat from the back of the chair and shoved it firmly into his chest. "Walk with me, now. We aren't staying in this suffocating little box a second longer." Elias stumbled slightly under the sudden force but caught the coat, letting Clara drag him by the sleeve out of the dressing room. They moved quickly down the winding concrete corridors of the convention center. The muffled sounds of the audience grew into a deafening roar, then abruptly faded into silence as Clara pushed her weight against a heavy fire doors. They spilled out onto an open-air, glass-bottomed observation walkway, suspended 50 floors above the sprawling, neon-lit grid of Seattle. The sudden rush of crisp, freezing night air hit Elias like a physical blow, shocking his system. He immediately braced his hands against the thick glass railing, staring down at the dizzying drop, the heavy city traffic below looking like tiny glowing veins of gold and red. "Look down there," Clara commanded, standing right beside him. Her gaze was fixed firmly on the illuminated horizon, her breath pluming in the cold air. Millions of people, thousands of tech companies. Do you know how many of those people played it entirely safe today? Elias let out a cynical, breathless laugh, shaking his head slowly as the wind whipped his hair across his forehead. "Most of them, probably, and they aren't about to humiliate themselves in front of 5,000 industry leaders and global investors." Clara turned to him, her eyes catching the reflection of the city lights, burning with an intense, unyielding fire that demanded his full attention. "And that is exactly why nobody knows their names. That is why they aren't changing the world, Elias."
She reached out, her warm fingers wrapping firmly around his freezing, trembling forearm. "You think I'm not terrified? You think I didn't throw up in the executive washroom 20 minutes ago?" Elias blinked, genuinely taken aback. His brow furrowed in deep confusion, the panic momentarily replaced by sheer surprise. "You? But you're Clara. You never break under pressure." A bitter, melodic chuckle escaped Clara's lips, and she let go of his arm to lean her back against the glass, her posture briefly betraying her own profound exhaustion. "I break all the time, Elias. I just don't let the fear of breaking stop me from building the next thing. You have convinced yourself that failure is a permanent tattoo, a scar that defines you forever. It's not. It's just a bruise. It fades. What doesn't fade is the quiet, hollow regret of standing at the edge of something magnificent and stepping backwards because you were simply afraid to fall." "London almost bankrupted us," Elias countered, his voice rising, battling the howling wind swirling around the glass corridor. He gestured wildly with his hands, his frustration boiling over. "My mistake almost cost you your entire career. You had to mortgage your house to keep the servers running." "And whose choice was it to stay and fight?" Clara fired back, her voice echoing sharply against the reinforced glass walls. She didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped right into his personal space, her eyes fiercely locked onto his, refusing to let him look away. "I chose to stay because I believe in you. I didn't invest my life into a perfect, flawless machine. I invested in a brilliant, flawed, relentlessly passionate human being who learns from every single time he falls flat on his face. London was a disaster, yes, but it taught us exactly how to build a better security protocol. If we run away tonight, we learn absolutely nothing. We just surrender to the shadows." Elias closed his eyes tightly, the roar of the wind mimicking the rush of blood pounding in his ears. He vividly imagined the code crashing on the giant screens. He imagined the devastating, mocking silence in the auditorium. He imagined the brutal tech blogs tomorrow morning. But then, anchored by Clara's steady, unwavering presence beside him, he imagined the alternative. He imagined walking away. He imagined waking up tomorrow morning in his apartment, perfectly safe, perfectly secure, but knowing with absolute certainty that he had let his own mind defeat him. The thought of that hollow, cowardly safety tasted like bitter ash in his mouth. "What if it fails, Clara?" Elias asked, his voice stripping away all the anger and defensiveness, leaving only a raw, terrifying vulnerability. He looked at her, searching her face for a magical guarantee he knew she couldn't give. "Then we sweep up the broken glass, we go back to the laboratory, and we build it all over again, but this time we build it knowing exactly what made it break." She extended her hand toward him, her palm open and steady. "We don't can cover the fear by pretending it's not standing right next to us, Elias. We can cover it by walking onto that stage despite it screaming in our ears. Are you with me?" Elias stared down at her offered hand. The subtle trembling in his own fingers hadn't entirely stopped. The heavy, cold knot of dread in the pit of his stomach was still there. The fear hadn't miraculously vanished, but suddenly, looking at Clara, it didn't seem so massive anymore. It was just a feeling. It was an emotion, not a dictator controlling his destiny. He reached out, his grip firming with sudden, surprising strength as he clasped her hand. He took a deep, cleansing breath of the freezing air, his jaw setting with a newly forged resolve. "I'm with you. Let's go." They navigated quickly back through the labyrinthine corridors, the transition from the freezing isolation of the glass walkway to the hyper-energized, chaotic atmosphere of the backstage area, feeling like crossing the threshold between two different universes. The stage manager, a stressed-looking man with a headset practically glued to his ear, sprinted toward them, frantically waving a glowing clipboard. 2 minutes. You're on in 60 seconds, people, the manager hissed, his eyes wide with logistical panic. Elias didn't even look at the manager. He walked with a smooth, purposeful stride straight to the podium staging area and flipped open his laptop. The red Delete System button still hovered on the screen, a digital ghost trying to haunt him one last time, begging him to choose the easy way out. With a calm, deliberate motion, his finger tapped the trackpad. He closed the destructive prompt. He opened the primary execution terminal for Project Nova. The terminal blinked green, ready and waiting. The heavy velvet curtains parted with a mechanical hum, and the blinding, intense glare of the stage spotlights washed over them. The applause erupted instantly, a deafening physical wave of expectation and energy that vibrated violently through the wooden floorboards beneath their feet. Clara walked out first, waving confidently to the massive crowd, effortlessly commanding the room with her usual magnetic charm. She paused at the edge of the stage, turning back to offer Elias one last deeply encouraging nod. Elias stepped forward into the light. The immense heat of the overhead spots beat down on his face, instantly warming his cold skin. He looked out into the cavernous auditorium, seeing thousands of faces staring back at him, illuminated by the glow of their devices. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, wild rhythm of adrenaline. The fear was still there, whispering in his ear, warning him of imminent catastrophe. He gripped the polished edges of the podium, his knuckles turning white. But this time, he didn't look down at his shoes. He raised his chin high, his eyes sweeping across the massive crowd, fully accepting the terrifying, breathtaking beauty of the moment. He leaned into the sleek microphone, his voice remarkably steady, carrying a quiet, resonant power that immediately silenced the murmuring room. "Good evening," Elias began, a small, courageous smile breaking across his face as he looked toward Clara in the front row. "Tonight, we are going to attempt something that has never been done in human history. It might not be perfect, it might even fail right before your eyes." He paused, letting the controversial statement hang in the silent, electrified air, his hand hovering confidently over the keyboard. "But that," Elias continued, his voice echoing with absolute conviction, "that is exactly why we have to try." He pressed the enter key. The complex code compiled in an instant. The massive holographic screens behind him roared to brilliant, blinding life, painting the entire auditorium in a wash of vibrant blue light. And as the crowd gasped in collective awe, Elias finally stopped being afraid of the fall, ready at last to see how high he could fly.